Eddie Cochran was never just a rock and roll star. He was the sound of a guitar echoing through endless summer days. The half-smile on a black and white screen. A free soul, burning bright, only to vanish at just 21. One April night in 1960, on a foggy road in England, the car hit a concrete post. No more new songs. No more sold-out shows. Only a bright orange guitar confiscated, and a chilling premonition, uttered just hours before he died. That young man, never called a husband, never heard a child call him Dad, left something behind. Something that still echoes in the memory of an entire generation. This is not just the story of a fallen star. It is the forgotten legacy of someone who lived too truly, too soon, and left too quickly. Join me, as we listen to the tragic fate of Eddie Cochran. You might not remember his name. But if you've ever heard the tune, "I'm gonna raise a fuss, I'm gonna raise a holler," chances are you nodded, almost unconsciously. Eddie Cochran, a name that may have faded into the dust of time, was once the unofficial voice of American youth in the 1950s. A guitar riff playing from the radio after school. A rebellious gaze on a small TV screen. An underground wave that stirred an entire generation of our fathers and mothers. In an era when Elvis Presley ruled the stage, and Johnny Cash carried the sorrow of the American South, Eddie Cochran arrived like a different kind of storm, younger, bolder, but filled with emotion. He didn't just sing. He shouted about the little injustices of teenage life, not enough allowance, strict parents, summers that were far too short. Yet somehow, those complaints became a call to arms. Because they were real. They were close. And they were delivered through a burning guitar that refused to be quiet. Eddie wasn't your typical classical artist. He didn't walk on stage with calm grace. He showed up like a small hurricane. In his hands, a bright orange Gretsch guitar, like a flame. On his lips, a mischievous smile. And in his eyes, something quietly sad that no one could quite name. He didn't try to make anyone fall in love with him. But somehow, every girl dreamed of Eddie, and every boy wanted to have his freedom. Today, the name Eddie Cochran may not be mentioned often. But ask the older generation, those who once stood beside jukeboxes in corner diners, or sat in the back seat of a '56 Chevy, and they'll smile. Because somewhere, in the heart of their youth, Eddie was there. And the strange thing is, everything came so fast, and disappeared just as quickly. In just a few short years, Eddie rose like a star. But his death, sudden, senseless, and eerily foretold, left many stunned. You think you know what a rock star is? Wait until you meet Eddie, the boy who dared to sing what no one else would say, and vanished before he even turned 22. A piece of youth, frozen in time. A whisper that never finished its last breath. Eddie wasn't born under the spotlight. The boy named Edward Raymond Cochran came into the world on October 3, 1938, in Albert Lea, Minnesota, a small, quiet town where winters covered the streets in white and summers slipped by like a long guitar note fading into silence. His father, Frank, was a machinist, his mother, Alice, a gentle, introspective woman. The Cochran family wasn't wealthy, nor were they poor, they simply did their best to live, one day at a time. After those early years in Minnesota, the family gradually moved south, following the post-Depression migration wave. They passed through Oklahoma, eventually settling in California, a place with more sunshine, but dreams that felt farther away. In Bell Gardens, a suburban backdrop to many stories of 1950s youth, Eddie grew up like any other boy. He loved football, had a need for speed, and would often sit alone for hours just to listen to the radio. But there was one thing that set him apart, and changed everything: his first guitar. They say Eddie played the ukulele before he even knew how to hold a dinner knife properly. He tried piano, drums, even sang in the school choir, but when he picked up the guitar, something lit up inside him. It wasn't just an instrument. It was a door. An escape route. He began locking himself in his bedroom for hours, practicing his first chords, recording on an old reel-to-reel, playing them back over and over, finding mistakes, fixing them, playing again. No one told him to. No one was waiting. But somehow, Eddie knew that music was the only path that made him feel truly alive. Frank and Alice supported their son, though worry lingered in their hearts. They didn't know much about rock and roll, nor could they grasp what Eddie was trying to build. But they saw something in his eyes, a light that couldn't be denied. And so they supported him, quietly. During his high school years, Eddie began performing at school dances, church events, and local fairs. He formed his first band, the Cochran Brothers, with a friend who shared the same last name, Hank Cochran, though they weren't related. The two traveled across California, singing country ballads with youthful, heartfelt voices. As a teenager, Eddie didn't dream of stardom. He just wanted to play music. But life has a way of pushing some people into the spotlight. And for Eddie, that spotlight burned bright, yet faded like fireworks in the night. In Bell Gardens, neighbors still remember the boy who always had a guitar slung over his shoulder, a half smile on his lips, and faraway dreams in his eyes. No one expected him to become a legend. But somehow, no one was surprised when he did. Fame didn't come to Eddie Cochran slowly. It hit, like the first electric chord he ever played into a microphone, bold, direct, and impossible to ignore. In 1956, at just 18 years old, Eddie was already making a mark as a session musician, contributing to the success of other singers. But with Sittin' in the Balcony, his first solo hit, Eddie stepped out from the background and into the spotlight. The brown-haired teen from Bell Gardens had found his way into radios across America. Unlike most artists of his time who relied entirely on record labels or producers, Eddie was different. He recorded his own tracks, arranged them himself, and often even edited the final mixes. In the studio, he was a tireless experimenter, tinkering with multi-track recording, overdubbing techniques, and even microphone placements no one else dared try. To him, music wasn't just emotion, it was science. A precise kind of magic. And then, in 1958, Summertime Blues was born. A short, slightly humorous song about a teenager pushed around by his parents, overworked by his boss, and too broke to go out. But when that melody played, every lyric seemed to speak for millions of young people of that time. People laughed, nodded along, and then hit replay. Summertime Blues wasn't just a commercial hit. It became a cultural milestone. An unofficial anthem for the baby boomer generation, just as America itself was beginning to change. Eddie followed up with Come On Everybody, Something Else, high-energy tracks driven by fierce guitar work, yet always wrapped in something deeply human and authentic. Nothing flashy. Nothing fake. Just a young man playing music because he didn't know how to do anything else. Fame brought Eddie to television and film, most notably the 1959 movie Go Johnny Go, where he appeared alongside Chuck Berry and Ritchie Valens. But wherever he was, Eddie never lost his essence, an artist who didn't act. He simply was himself. In the UK, where he toured in 1960, Eddie Cochran wasn't just admired, he was revered. Crowds lined up for blocks, screaming as they would later for the Beatles. And yet, Eddie never seemed entirely comfortable in the glare of fame. He spoke little, smiled softly, and every time he stepped off stage, he returned to his guitar, his half-finished ideas, and a stack of demos that never got completed. April 1960. No rain. Dry roads. And Eddie Cochran, just 21 years old, was on his way back to America after a successful tour in the United Kingdom. That night, at the Bristol Hippodrome, Eddie shared the stage with Gene Vincent, a blazing performance, the theater roaring with energy, as if his guitar had set the room on fire. The cheers behind the velvet curtain, the endless applause, it felt like all of England had been waiting for this sound. Rock and roll, the rebellious American rhythm, had finally found a home across the ocean. But when the curtain fell, something, no one knows exactly what, shifted the course of fate. They left the venue late at night, catching a taxi to make their early flight from Heathrow. The cream-colored Ford Consul rolled along the Bath Road toward London, carrying 5 passengers: Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, Sharon Sheeley, Eddie's devoted girlfriend and secret fiancé, tour manager Patrick Tompkins, and a young driver named George Martin. A quiet night. No rain. No sharp turns. But at exactly 11:50 p.m., on Roden Hill, the car lost control. No other vehicles. No sudden obstacles. Just one crash. One concrete light pole. And then, silence. Eddie, sitting in the middle of the back seat, instinctively threw himself toward Sharon, as if trying to shield her with his body. She survived. But the door flew open. And Eddie was thrown from the car, his head hitting the pavement hard. They say his eyes were still open. At St. Martin's Hospital in Bath, doctors did all they could. But the injuries were too severe. And at exactly 4:10 p.m. the next day, Easter Sunday, Eddie Cochran was pronounced dead. Age 21. Never married. Never heard a child call him Dad. Never finished that last album. Later, Sharon Sheely revealed something that sent chills down the spine. Just hours before the crash, as they were preparing to leave the hotel, Eddie had turned to her, quiet and thoughtful, and softly said, "Sherry, you know, I've got this strange feeling. Like fate won't let us stay together for long. Something's about to happen, and I can feel it. A vague premonition? A nameless instinct? Or perhaps, just the deep sensitivity of an artist who always sensed when the silence was near." Eddie's death sent shockwaves through the music world. No one could believe that a rising star, barely at the beginning, could vanish so quickly. Gene Vincent, his friend and fellow performer, survived but suffered serious leg injuries. He would limp for the rest of his life, and carry the emotional scars until the end. The driver, George Martin, just 19 at the time, was convicted of dangerous driving. He was fined and banned from driving for 15 years. But just 8 years later, the ban was lifted. Some said he had endured too much emotional trauma. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps not. But Eddie never had the chance to recover. The car was wrecked. The remaining belongings were taken to the local police station, including Eddie's iconic orange Gretsch 6120 guitar. It said that a young police cadet named David Harmon, working the night shift, picked it up and played it. No one could have known that Harmon would later become Dave D, frontman of the popular British band Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch. One guitar. One crash. One star extinguished, lighting the path for another to rise. As if Eddie Cochran, in some way, continued to echo through others. On April 25, 1960, Eddie Cochran's body was returned to the United States. Quietly. Without fanfare. The funeral was held at Forest Lawn, California, where now, a simple headstone marks the end of a life that never truly got to begin. None of them live there anymore. The old neighbors have all moved away. The sound of guitar once echoing from the garage now exists only in memory. And the house on Bernice Circle, the place where Eddie Cochran once wrote songs, laughed with friends, and sat by the window dreaming of tour dates, is quieter now than ever before. Not abandoned in the usual sense. Not broken down or decaying. But something in the air there has frozen in time. It's just a typical post-war American home, low-sloped roof, neatly trimmed lawn, cream-colored walls. But it once witnessed late-night jam sessions, saw Sharon Sheely jotting down lyrics, heard Eddie run through dozens of new riffs on a small amp pushed up against the wall. The bright orange Gretsch 6120, the most beloved instrument Eddie owned, is no longer there. After the accident, it was taken in as evidence. Held at the Chippenham police station for a time, and then, it vanished. Some say it was sold. Others believe it ended up in a private collection. But what's certain is this: Eddie never touched it again. All of Eddie's remaining assets, including music rights, some recording equipment, a personal car, and the house, were estimated at under $100,000 at the time. A shockingly small number for someone who had reached such fame. There was no massive fortune. No lavish estate. Just a young man, a pile of demo tapes, a few unreleased songs, and a love for music that remained unfinished. In England, where Eddie died, they did not forget him. On Roden Hill, where the crash happened, a simple stone marker was placed. Nothing grand. Just his name, the date of his death, and one quiet line: "He gave us something else." At the chapel garden of St. Martin's Hospital in Bath, an old sundial was restored, accompanied by a memorial plaque. In 2010, for the 50th anniversary of Eddie's passing, a small stone was added nearby, where the late afternoon sun now casts shadows across his name, like a fading guitar chord at dusk. Then, in 2018, "Three Steps to Heaven," the song released posthumously, became the name of a new memorial structure. 3 stone steps leading to a round platform in the garden, where fans can sit in silence, place their hand on the cold stone wall, and remember someone who never had the chance to grow old. But in Buena Park, California, the place where Eddie once lived, once loved, once dreamed, the silence remains. There is no plaque. No visitors. Just an ordinary house in an aging neighborhood, where the breeze across the lawn sometimes seems to carry the faint echo of a long-lost guitar. And in that silence, one question still lingers: if he had lived, what more would he have written? Eddie Cochran never had the chance to grow old. He left this world at 21, an age when most of us are only beginning to understand who we are. And perhaps because of that, his image remains frozen in memory, an eternal symbol of youth that never fades, never bends with time. Eddie's career wasn't long. Just about 4 years of official recordings. But even that brief span left an unmistakable echo in the history of rock and roll. Not because of the numbers. Not because of how many records he sold or how high he climbed on the charts. But because of the way he made people feel. A guitar riff, sharp, powerful, speaking on behalf of all the tension, rebellion, and longing of a generation trying to break free from the mold. And yet within that same sound, there was something gentle, like a quiet message: I'm just like you. I'm searching too. Eddie wasn't just a musician. He was a storyteller through sound. And at a time when rock music was still in its infancy, he dared to do what few others did: record his own songs, produce them himself, shape his own style, even when no one fully understood what he was chasing. Today, artists like the Beatles, The Who, Bruce Springsteen, and Joan Jett all cite Eddie as an influence. Not because he was the most famous, but because he was one of the first to step off the beaten path, even if that path led to the sharp turn where it all ended. But more than music, what Eddie left behind was a feeling. The feeling of summer afternoons by an old radio. The feeling of falling in love for the first time, of heartbreak, of rebellion, and eventually, of quiet. The feeling that, even if life is short, we can still live it fully, if we stay true to ourselves. If you've ever been a teenager, ever felt like no one understood you, ever screamed inside, "Why doesn't anyone hear me?" Then maybe, just maybe, Eddie Cochran already sang it for you. If you've ever heard "Summertime Blues" playing from your dad's old radio. If you've ever stared out the window, listening to a guitar and seeing your youth reflected in the sound. Then maybe, just maybe, Eddie Cochran once passed through your memory too. Share with us below, a song, a moment, something he left in your heart. Because sometimes, as long as someone still remembers, they never truly disappear. Thank you for following this story. If it meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so we can keep honoring the memories that should never be forgotten. We'll see you again, in the next story.